Welcome to our micro seminar titled Online Cheating, What Can Be Done to Ensure Academic Integrity. My name is Dr. Patrick Callahan. I'm the president of the Alliance, and I'm also the director of professional development at Lawrence Technological University. The Alliance is really focused on promoting best practices among our member institutions and really recognizing and promoting our faculty who do amazing work in the field of online learning. I would encourage you, if you're interested in joining the Alliance, to reach out to me or any of the other members, because we're always looking for good people to continue the mission and support the mission. I'd like to start by introducing our moderator. It's Sean Blackbeard Moore. I call him Dr. Moore. Dr. Moore is the director of e-learning at Oakland University. He's worked at OU for over 16 years. And he's been an amazing contributor to the Alliance and is recognized not only locally as an expert, but nationally for his work in online education. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Sean Moore, our moderator.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm not going to go with a pirate accent, so don't worry about that. So welcome, everyone. We appreciate you joining us today. We're really excited about this. I shouldn't say we're excited about this topic. It's a strange way to put it. I, as a pirate, am all for pirating papers and online things like that. That's why I'm dressed up like this, so you can see that I'm an online pirate. But we are going to be talking today about online cheating and really what can be done to ensure academic quality or integrity. And we see on the video screen here, we're going to have our colleagues from Walsh presenting and then Baker presenting. We're going to have some wonderful ways to look at this. We're going to have some time for questions on there. But just to sort of lead us off, we all, I'm sure at this point in time, have heard about some of the challenges of the online realm and ensuring that it's the student doing the work or they're not sharing the work with others. Or we've all heard about Chegg, I'm sure at this point in time, maybe a few hundred too many times, and sharing things. So it's a lot that we have to try to figure out and work together on, and hopefully some creative solutions that we have here. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about it from our colleagues from a few different institutions, but we really would like to get some of your feedback on it too and hear from you. So we're going to leave some time at the end there for some questions and maybe even some great suggestions you all have for this. So we're looking forward to it. If you do have a Halloween costume and are able to turn your camera on, go ahead and turn that on. I might be the only one here dressed up, and that's absolutely fine. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Terry Richards. She's one of our colleagues, professor of information technology over at Walsh College, and she's going to get us started.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. I am going to be talking about trends in, and hang on, I've got to share my screen here for you. First, I'm going to be talking about trends in academic misconduct, which is the catch-all term that I like to use for it, because it encompasses cheating, it encompasses plagiarism, collusion, deceiving a professor about something, and so on. And one of the big things nowadays is groupthink, only it's not groupthink, it's group exam taking, etc. So let me get this started and then we'll get going. Putting it into slideshow mode. And I've got to default from presentation mode here. Give me 1 second, and then we will be underway. Hold on 1 second. For some reason, the Zoom control, there we go, the Zoom control buttons were not disappearing for me. So, all right. So we all know that cheating has gone on for a very, very long time. This isn't news to anybody, I'm certain. The pre-internet area, we all saw, those of us who were around back then, we all saw people copying things from a textbook. They go to the library, no one knew it. They just sat down and they wrote it out. They copied it verbatim. They put the book back on the shelf. They typed it up back in the days of the typewriter, handed it in. The professor couldn't check it. They couldn't do anything with it. So it was presumed that it was original work, and I'm sure the majority of it was, but there was no way to look into the archives and see. Professor could not really tell, right? So maybe it seemed as though there was less cheating going on back then than there is now, but I think it just wasn't caught. And of course, nowadays, people say people cheat more often, students cheat more often in online classes, but I don't really think that they do. And here are some of the ways that you can see this. We got a student here who is printing out a bottle label, making it look like vitamin water, and putting it on his water bottle. You know, the old hands, the writing on a fingernail, which is quite creative there. And do they get caught? Of course they do. Of course they get caught. There's any number of ways that you can get caught as a student here. Now, some studies, and this is not all studies, but some studies show that the majority of students do admit to cheating at some point in their career. And I find the numbers staggering here. Up to 98% admit that they cheat at one point or another. The college students, now I disagree with this, but it could be true. The college students who are most likely to cheat are engineering and business majors. This is from 2021. It was a study of quite thousands of, and the link is in the references, thousands of students. I'm not sure why engineering and business majors would be the ones that cheat the most. I would think people writing papers for literature classes might be a little easier. But at any rate, the really upsetting thing or shocking thing about this is that NPR, National Public Radio, polled students and found that 2/3 of them think it's okay because all students do it. And you can read this yourself, but in just to highlight it here, one student said it's not a big deal because he or she needed to get into a quality university, and that was the way to do it, was to make sure that they turned in a quality work, and to do so they had to cheat. So the ground was set long before online learning. And this is just a simple one case study. I just wanted to show the increase at Penn State between 2018, 2019 for cheating, as well as unauthorized collaboration, which is what I referred to a couple of minutes ago. And we'll see why in a minute. So enter the digital era. It was really the World Wide Web that brought out the ability for students to easily search. And that didn't come about until the 1990s. And everyone could reach out and find at their fingertips any research material they needed. And then with the help of cutting and pasting, and if they needed it, an online thesaurus to replace words that they wanted to make it look a little different, right? They were able to do that to avoid detection. And so you might get something like this. They find something on the internet. This is probably nothing you haven't all seen. They run some of it through some words. They pick out some words, run it through a thesaurus, or they just make up new words. And they think that this is not cheating, okay? Because they rewrote it in their own words, they think. Sometimes they use words because they're using a thesaurus. Sometimes they put words in here that they can't even tell you what it means. So that's one way to catch it, is if you have a student who isn't typically a good writer and suddenly turns in something with very eloquent writing or very deep writing, that can be a clue. But, you know, we have Turnitin.com and other things to catch that. So that's not the end of the type of work that gets done on the internet. Here's one way to get around it. We have students that are using online translation apps to take an article from a foreign paper or foreign journal. And you don't really have to know too much about the language in general. You can see this is technology. This is El Mundo, Spanish, innovation. And they're not sure what this means maybe, but maybe it'll work on global innovation. So they run it through a translator. This one happened to be Bing that I used. And it takes, you know, what's here, throws it in there, turns it into English, right? And that is what the student turns in. So they wrote none of it. One more example. This one is Das Bild. That's a German one. Again, they copied something. You don't, as I said, you don't have to understand the language. They did a search here for Elon Musk, came up with an article. Once they converted it, which took all of 3 seconds, literally, they were able to see that, okay, I can use that. Oops, I went the wrong way. My apologies. All right, and this is again what they turned in. Now, the thing that's interesting about these is let me go back 2 slides. I took this and I ran this, the English, through Turnitin or Google search, didn't find it. So clearly it can be a way to get around those search engines or those verification engines. However, this one I was able to find because somebody had helpfully put out a translation of the Das Bild page. All right, so it's not foolproof for the students. However, it is one way that they indeed can cheat and find out, and we can not know about it. Another way is they can simply write something in their native language if they're not a native speaker, run that through a translation app a couple times, and it may be different enough that it's not going to get caught. All right, so another issue is now, especially in the past year or so, gosh, it's been going on almost 2 years since the pandemic, and we all got unceremoniously dumped at home and blocked from our offices. We're putting exams online. We don't have a choice, right? And there's a lot of ways that you can reduce the risk of cheating or catch cheating that went on. I don't really like to assume that that's my student's intent. That's their intent, I'm sorry. So I personally enact a few practices before I even open the exam up. First of all, and not everybody has to agree with this, especially in some of the disciplines that you teach, but avoid test bank test questions. If you Google some of them, they're almost all compromised on Chegg and some of the other sites. I always, even if I've written the questions, every semester I grab a few out of the exam bank that I wrote, and I Google a few of them. And usually if I grab 3 to 5 of them and I don't find them, I know that the exam has not been compromised on the internet at any rate. Real common things here: scramble your exam questions. You don't have to leave an exam open all week if you don't want to. You can say, just like on an on-ground class, Sunday from this time to this time, the exam is going to be open. Make yourself available. Or not Sunday, the week of the day that you, or the day of the week that you meet. You can check students' IP addresses if you're a little concerned. I did catch a student once who really excelled on a paper that an exam they turned in. And I thought it was suspicious, to say the least. And we use Moodle at Walsh College. I went into the IP address log of where they took the exam and found out that they were taking it from somewhere in Europe. I can't recall right now, but they were not in Europe. As a matter of fact, I could see 2 logins in Moodle. So they were getting someone overseas to take the exam for them, not thinking that I would check the IP address. For the more scientific or mathematic courses, you can have parameter-driven exams where it can be set up so that you change the input parameters for every student who receives it. That means that it's 10% in this exam. The next student gets 12%. They get 10,000. They get 14,000, and so on. And this also can be facilitated by your LMS. I modify my exams and my assignments every semester, just slightly. I don't mean I change them all, but I change up a few things just in case things are getting out there. I also don't show the exam answers at the end when they submit them. I only show them the ones they got wrong. Of course, if they want to review the entire exam, they're welcome to in my presence, and they can't take it with them. Same with if you have essay questions, you can use Turnitin for that. I'm not sure if all LMSs do, but you can certainly cut and paste it. And finally, exam proctoring software. That's something that's been really rolled out because of the pandemic. Yes, that's where the student is at home, has to dial into a service. There's a webcam on their computer. It watches them as they take the exam and makes sure that there's no, some of it's very elaborate. They watch the student's eyes to make sure the student's not looking around, which can be seen as unfair to some students, especially those of us that look up at the ceiling when we're thinking, although now that I think about it, that's a good place to put answers. So, but exam proctoring software, there's a few out there. And here's one from an exam proctoring software site where they said, don't do this, but here's how people can get away with it. So they're saying, this is a disclaimer. We don't endorse it, but here's a way you can get around our software. So this one got me. It can only tell if there's one person in the room. The webcam sees a person, obviously. So they suggest you get somebody to be behind your laptop, even out the door, connect another monitor, and take the exam that way. And instant message, or I don't know how they would get the questions back and forth. Perhaps the other person just takes the exam. Some of them do check to see how many monitors are logged in. But they said that's easily explained away if you say, well, my laptop monitor is not working. Other examples that they had suggested were to go to the trouble of filming a video loop of you taking an exam for an hour, just sitting there looking up and down like you're taking an exam, right? And I don't know why students wouldn't just spend that hour testing or studying for the test, but they don't always. All right, so the last thing before I turn it over to my colleagues is that we have kind of brought about this culture of group work with social media, with the forced remote learning. And this is these are quotes directly from a resource at the end. This is a couple ways that students think it's okay to get help during an exam. One student was actually asking Siri or Alexa for answers. I'm not sure how they pull all this off, but this is one way. California State had a huge cheating scandal because a student actually narked on the others that her peers were all in an exam or in group chat sharing exam answers as they took it. Again, you can check IP addresses. That's not going to help in this situation, but it's something else that you can do, especially if answers are similar. And finally, unauthorized collaboration in these exams was such a big impact. It was so widespread that they talked to students and they found out that students were desperate to connect, that they were using, or in some courses they were being encouraged to create group chats. And then that became a place where they got onto a slippery slope where they were meeting to talk about a project, then they met to talk about individual assignments, and then they thought, why not? Let's just try it for exam questions as well. And this is a quote from this author here. So you can see there are a number of ways to get around it. Matter of fact, there's probably no technology that students can't get around. So we have to do something else. We have to bring up a culture that does not ask for group work. It asks for honor and it asks for integrity. And that's where I'm going to pass the baton off to my A4EOE colleagues, Dr. Joanna Palmer and Dr. Michelle Ryder-Miller, and let them talk to you about some of the solutions to cheating.
Thank you so much for that, Terry. I think you gave us the perfect lead in. And so I'm going to give Michelle a second to bring up our slides and get herself situated. And so I think, Terry, just as a bridge, you totally highlighted that some great points, right? Cheating has always existed. So not only has the internet and the web changed how we access information, how much information we have access to, it also equips us as the instructor with some better tools to monitor integrity in the classroom. So I think all great points. And as you were talking, I kept thinking, man, all of these people, I'm with you. If they're having if they have to plan an hour of elaborate what have you, instead of just studying and taking the exam, I feel like that's like the modern day equivalent of making that little vitamin water. label, right? Like their attention is definitely in the wrong place. And I don't know if there's anything we can do about those folks. If they're going to put that much effort into it, those are going to be the hard ones, I think. But I don't think the majority of students are there. So Michelle and I are going to flip gears, right? We know that based on the information Terry presented, that there always has been some cheating in school, whether it's high school, college, and so forth, likely even within career settings, right? So it's not going anywhere. So what do we do? I mean, we can't continuously chase all the technology either and try to find ways to unearth these kind of schemes that are out there, especially these like elaborate ones. I hadn't even heard of this whole monitor and setting up in a room with a person. So we'll drive ourselves crazy doing that. So we're going to talk about promoting academic integrity in the classroom, and really how do we empower both a culture that promotes academic integrity, but then also enable our faculty and students to want to join along for the ride for us. But first, who are we? My name is Joanna Palmer. I'm Director of Academics for online, and I am joined by Michelle. Hi, Michelle. She's currently the Dean of Colleges of Social Sciences and Education, as well as a Director for Psychology at Baker College. So before we get too far in, we want to ask you some questions. We want to see we saw who you were from the chat and where you're from, but we have a few poll questions. So if you'll entertain us for just a couple minutes to give us some good information about where we're from, or where you're from, and what you have at your institution. This first question is really getting at what best describes your institution. Do you have an academic honor code policy that really defines cheating and consequences for cheating? Do you have more than that? Do you have an academic honor code, but also then a larger framework that talks about positive and ethical behaviors that are expected, right? So not only what we don't want, but what we do want. Or do neither of these fit your organization? And we give everyone an I'm not sure what we have, which is okay. The second question gets at what does your institution do for faculty in regard to training and professional development related to academic integrity, right? So your options here are pretty much what we have in the handbook is all we have. Or maybe it's in the handbook and there's some information or something in an orientation and training when you first started. Does your organization add to that some additional ongoing training and development related to academic integrity? Are you having frequent conversations as a department, as a colleague set with your program directors or deans about academic integrity? And then the last question is the exact same question, except for from the students. And we give you an I don't know here because we recognize that some faculty may not be aware. What do students get? Is it just in the handbook? Is it in their orientation? Do they have student-facing resources, training to help alleviate maybe the desire or the likelihood of cheating? So go ahead and get your answers into those questions. And then I will leave it to who the moderators to then click us over to see what the results are once they feel like we got a good representation.
We're stealing all the questions right now as they come through.
Okay, perfect. I know, I thought of you as a pirate when she mentioned collusion. I was like, ooh, that sounds very piratey.
I don't know why you would say that. I'm very professionally dressed here.
All right. All right, are we getting enough players to get some answers?
Let's give it 10 more seconds or 5 more seconds.
All right, so looking at 71% said primarily having an academic honor code policy, right? So I'm going to tell you based on doing research across looking at hundreds of institutions, that's usually the case, right? We have a policy that defines what cheating is and whatnot. And then it looks like a smaller percentage might have a different framework, maybe a code of conduct indicating what type of behavior we do want to see and encourage. And then a few with neither. As far as faculty, good. So it looks like the majority here have some optional trainings and professional development for faculty above and beyond maybe just mentioning it in a handbook and so forth. So that's great. A good frame foundation for what we're going to talk about today. Student facing though, again, I would say this is probably where I expected it to land. A lot of times it is in the student handbook, and there may or may not be anything more. When they get to their course, they might have a statement regarding academic integrity from the faculty member in a syllabus or some sort of course documents, but then that varies often from class to class in that case. So excellent. Thank you so much for giving us that context so we know who we're working with here. We have one last question for you, and this one you're going to leverage the chat for. So we are all in academics here. I am making that assumption, right? So we're in higher education, we're in academics. A lot of us are teaching or have taught in the classroom. So this should be a pretty easy question. So in the chat, just right off the cuff, in a statement, or a few words, I want you to define academic integrity. And we will give you a minute or so to just kind of collect a thought and put it there. But really, I want kind of your first thought. If a student asks you, what is academic integrity? What are you going to say to them? Stuff coming in. Very good. Thank you, Polly, for getting us started. Oh, excellent. These are good. This is exactly what I wanted it to be.
Right. They're all the same, yet very different.
Okay, we'll let a few more roll in. Okay. So this is perfect. So what I want to point out here, and I saw this activity once when a few colleagues and I were working on how do we kind of create an academic integrity philosophy for Baker College. We wanted something more than the honor code policy, which is what I'm going to talk to you about. One of the things we stumbled upon was, I think it was the Center for Academic Integrity was having a national conference, and they went around with a microphone and they were asking people mingling between conference sessions who were at a conference for academic integrity to define it. They gave a lot of this, or they kind of gave a blank stare, right? It is an abstract term in and of it. It's nothing like we can touch. What we have here in the chat are ethical behaviors, right? These are examples of somebody who has academic integrity, right? These would be behaviors they would exhibit, but they don't actually define what academic integrity is, right? So they're very specific, right? Do your own work, cite your sources, follow the directions, be honest, right? So these are all characteristics and behaviors, ideally that would be indicative of academic integrity, but they don't define academic integrity itself. So I think I like to point that out because it's just, it's that kind of concept and term, right? Even for us, and we live in it every day, and we're trying to promote academic integrity. So we do, I do like the fact that we kind of talked about all the positive behaviors that they could do, but it doesn't actually define the term academic integrity. It gives us some good examples of behavior that would be indicative of somebody with academic integrity. So, all right. So keep that in mind. This is a very messy, complex topic we're talking about. And if it's still complex for us, and our ability to define it, then we translate that down to our students. And I think it's worth noting too, you have to also think about your students and where they're at and the type of students. I know we have people from institutions on the call here today that have more traditional age students, right? They're going to have more of that 18, 19, 20-year-old in a community college setting. Terry shared some information from high school and college in her presentation. Some of us work with more non-traditional age students, from some of the institutions that are represented on the call today. So think of that too, right? We're trying to do a lot of work related moral development and ethical behavior. And I think we make an assumption in college that they should have learned this in high school. What I know from just understanding development, they're not all going to get it in high school. They're not there yet. Their brain's not done forming to get to that complex ethical and decision making until they're really almost in their mid-20s. So we have work to do. We can't assume that they know everything. They may differentiate and rationalize behaviors very differently. And I want to also say that that's a great opportunity because we're getting them at the exact right age, typically, where we can help influence that. a bit in what we do. So that's why the title of our presentation is on promoting academic integrity. Obviously, we are stewards of integrity in our classroom, and we have to do something when we see, and we should do due diligence to make sure integrity is maintained. So all of those things around academic honor code policies, yes, still our responsibility, but we have a responsibility also to promote academic integrity. And I want us all to at least think about the idea of moving beyond just an honor code policy, right? And everything we're talking about today could be done at an institution level if you are in a position where you think you could drive that, but also at a course level, right? You have the ability to do this at a course level, but really moving beyond that, don't do these behaviors, don't get caught doing these things, and kind of mentally shift that over to what is academic integrity? Why is it important? And how do we in this classroom collectively, right? Terry mentioned this idea of collective work and how students are so connected. Having that conversation about, okay, what does academic integrity mean in this classroom, involving the students in that discussion, and really getting them focused on the idea of how and why it's important to have ethical behaviors, and having them talk to each other, because I think that's interesting. You can start to avoid some of that slippery slope that people get on if you head the conversation in the right direction. So what did we do at Baker? Like I said, my position, and I would say probably the position of Baker College, is an academic honor code is not enough, right? We all have it. So it's a great place. We have to have it, and it doesn't go away. But we need to create a grounding framework to really support that, right? So the academic honor code becomes secondary to the idea of creating that environment that promotes professional and ethical behavior. So our steps through this, and again, available if anyone wants to talk about this more, because I could talk about it all day long, but really it's talking about creating a shared definition of what your institution believes, or again, what your classroom believes, right? How do you kind of form that? And it could be different between your 100, 1000 level class versus your senior or even graduate class, right? If you engage people in this conversation of discussing integrity and ethics and academics and why it's important, it's interesting to see how students shift their change over time. What behaviors align with academic integrity, right? We already had a whole bunch in the chat, right? And I'm going to show you kind of how this folds together. But then I think even more important, keep talking about it, which is the idea of, from an institutional standpoint, are we providing additional opportunities for people to talk about integrity, talk about, the challenges of having those conversations regarding cheating in the classroom with faculty, among faculty. And then also faculty to students, right? So we need to have that ongoing. It can't be a one and done in a handbook or an orientation, or it won't work. So back to the definition of academic integrity. This is a very scaled down version. We have a much larger document. And again, I'd be willing to share that with anyone who would be interested in doing some of this work at their institution or even at the class level. But this is how we have defined the very basic kind of first part of the definition of what academic integrity is. And it's an ideal, right? So that's why it's not that tangible thing of, just doing your own work. That's part of it. That's part of a behavior that supports this ideal. But at Baker College, we define academic integrity as the ideal that all stakeholders in our academic community affirm and share the belief that honesty, trust, and accountability will be adhered to by all. If you think of all those behaviors that everybody just chatted a couple of minutes ago about what academic integrity is, it fits here, right? There was honesty, trust, accountability for doing your own work. All of those things are here. So this becomes our larger, again, very base level description of how we define academic integrity. You can see this then goes beyond. Our academic integrity folds in a bit of our code of conduct just for being a good human kind of behavior as well. So we took that definition and we created a philosophy to go, right? So we didn't want it to be a policy. We have an academic honor code policy, but we wanted a philosophy. And so our philosophy has 3 pillars or 3 core ideals: mutual honesty, trust, and respect, responsibility for professional and ethical conduct, and fairness and transparency and exemplary behavior. So in our institutional documents and training and workshops that we do, we go into great detail to kind of define what these are. But the end result then is, okay, so we say these things are important, but what does that mean, right? We've all had trainings where they're kind of up here and we end it with, so what do I do in my class with that? So we're going to fast forward to kind of what ends up happening in the class. Once we have talked to faculty and students about these core ideals, and we've talked about what they are and why they're important, then we try to lay out examples of the behaviors similar to what you gave us in the very beginning in the chat. Go ahead, Michelle. So for each of the core ideals, and we won't go into all of them here, and I'm not going to read these, but it will give you an idea. So supporting the core ideal of mutual honesty, trust, and respect, this is what students will do. So if we pick a couple off here, it talks about everything that we talked about, using and integrating sources appropriately, but also learning from constructive criticism and feedback, producing work that's authentic, being aware of their own personal bias. There's lots of things here that we can talk about with our students, right? And that is our hope, that the faculty will be able to take this information, and depending on the course that they're teaching, the level of the course that they're teaching, they have a lot that they could talk about in the first week with students as they maybe work with their class to collaboratively set some guidelines and parameters. Most of the time, they all kind of get to the same place, but there is power in engaging the students in the conversation with the instructor to kind of get to a place where, okay, so this is what we're saying is important, and this is why it's important, and this is what we're all going to agree to do as a class, right? Go ahead and advance, Michelle. And so the same thing, this is mutual honesty, trust, and respect again, but this is a set of some faculty behaviors. So what will faculty do in the classroom? And Michelle's going to talk a bit more about how sometimes what we see faculty doing is not really what we hope that they're doing, right? So again, we want them to explain the appropriate use of sources, right? Again, don't assume that a student coming out of high school is going to be exactly where you want them regarding the use and citing of sources. It's just going to vary. So we owe it to them to at least kind of explain some things. Then you're going to see a lot of modeling behavior here. And you can advance through these, Michelle, because I want to get to your part, but we will have this presentation posted after with the video, I'm sure. But really, there's a lot of modeling in it, and we are really focusing also on how do faculty show students, right? So Terry in her presentation had her citations. She's going to link to references. You cannot believe how many times I see faculty just going on and providing resources and slide decks and different things for their students, and there's no modeling of any of it in there, right? So that's like a small thing we can do to do that. The last slide, one more, Michelle, go back one more, because I think I have not touched upon that. So the last part, and I think this is essential if you are working at this institutionally or you're involved with academic integrity at an institution or department level at your school, is thinking about what administration does. We identified stakeholder groups as students, faculty, and administration. And if administration isn't on board with the academic integrity philosophy or framework or whatever you want to call it at your institution, then it's hard for it to work. So whether it's administration is going to work to ensure there's clear guidelines for things, making sure when we're looking at various processes at the institutional level, whether it's our instructional design team, assessment, and so forth, that we too are setting up things that will align with our academic integrity philosophy or promote academic integrity into the classroom. And Michelle's going to talk a little bit about that, about what we can do even curricular wise that way. So I know that was fast, and I tried to pare it down more, but that was the best I could do. But it's easier said than done. And so Michelle's going to actually talk about now at Baker, what do we actually see faculty doing and what are we trying to help them do more of in the classroom? So go ahead, Michelle.
Hello there. So this is something that I try to focus a lot on in all my free time at work. But one of the first things that I see is that our faculty do not use our UniCheck. That's our plagiarism software that's embedded in Canvas. They're owned by Turnitin, so it looks like the same report, basically. They don't use that option. Or worse, they ignore the option when it's turned on. When our curriculum goes through revision, it automatically is now turned on. And I look in the grade book at some of the courses and they don't use it. They also don't take the time to learn how to use it. They don't, they'll see a high percentage, and so they automatically assume it's plagiarism, and they don't look into it and learn how to use that tool. They're also not transparent with their students. They just give a 0 without talking about it. They make assumptions about what the student did or didn't do, and they're not being transparent. When the faculty don't pay attention, it impacts our credibility with students. It allows students to get away with plagiarism, and it reinforces the unethical behavior. It gives the message that we don't care as an institution. One story that Joanna told about what one faculty said that was just spot on was in using Unicheck and using the plagiarism tools, told the student, my goal is to help you understand what plagiarism is and to become confident in planning and creating your own content and becoming confident in your own knowledge, which is exactly what we want our faculty to do. So my shift in focus in my own classes is being transparent. I talk about plagiarism in class. I talk about the importance of citing your sources and giving credit to the work that other people did and where you got your knowledge from. I engage students in discussion about citing sources and about plagiarism and the importance of academic integrity. We want faculty to take the time to learn Unicheck as a tool, not as a got you. Right? Oh, I caught you. We want them to talk to students and teach them. And I'm curious in the chat box, how many of you as faculty member has actually taught your students about how to use the plagiarism tool, or the plagiarism checker as a tool? Anybody actually have a conversation with students about it? You do go over it, excellent. It's a really important idea to discuss it, absolutely. We want the students actually to be happy that they have access to the tool. We want them to look as it is a positive thing, not a negative thing. But I think too often the faculty feel uncomfortable about it. It's easier to ignore it. They do get nervous about those scores, absolutely. And frankly, the faculty are uncomfortable having to deal with it, so they ignore it rather than have to have those uncomfortable conversations. We want to change the attitude about academic integrity from it's uncomfortable to this is helpful. This is a positive thing. When we're transparent with our students, that leads them in the right direction towards academic integrity. One thing that I have learned in the last year and a half is that the students, at least in Canvas, I don't know how many of you use Canvas, but at least in Canvas, the students do not know how to view all the different ways that instructors give feedback. They don't know how to do it. And I'm a student right now at a school that also uses Canvas, and it takes 3 or 4 clicks to get to the different ways they can comment, inline comments on the paper. And so I've actually created a document that we can share out that shows them all the different ways that I give feedback, including access. How do they access their Unicheck report? Because they didn't know it was there. Someone said, we have a separate site that students can use to check things before. Yes, to me, I think that that's the best tool. Or at least they can check it the minute they upload their assignment, and then they can realize that they didn't do a good enough job paraphrasing or they forgot to cite, and so they can resubmit. And then when it comes to curriculum development, what do we want our subject matter experts to do? We want them to think about academic integrity when they are creating or revising their curriculum. It could be as simple as just switching or alternating their assignment types within courses. Maybe they have an essay and they're going to switch it to a PowerPoint. Maybe they did a PowerPoint and they can switch it to a flyer. We can't keep the same assignments for 10 years because we can't keep up with Course Hero, right? We have to switch it out. If you have case scenarios, we do a lot of case scenarios. So this summer when we revised abnormal psychology, for example, we created multiple scenarios that the faculty can choose from, and that'll help keep down the cheating. Terry had talked about the test banks making sure if you do use test banks, that you have random questions orders, that you time the tests. And when they think about the academic integrity when they're revising courses, that in and of itself helps reduce the cheating. So just some kind of summarizing, some closing tips and strategies. Think about academic integrity as not just catching them and stopping them from cheating, but also just articulating the ethical behaviors that promote academic integrity, the ethical behaviors that we want from our students and, frankly, staff and faculty. Involve everybody when you're creating an academic integrity philosophy. Reinforce it through continued discussion. I noticed in the poll questions that there was a lot of one and done conversations about it. Have continued discussions about it, and make sure that the faculty are comfortable and confident in using their tools and also talking about it with students. Ensure that your policies are up to date to address today's cheating behaviors, and be proactive and find teaching moments with your students before they engage in dishonest behavior, and helping them learn how to have good academic integrity.
All right, thank you. I want to thank Terry and Joanna and Michelle. We have a few minutes left here. If anyone wants to get some questions, we may be able to open up microphones, but if not, you can type your questions in or give any feedback you have here. We'd like to take a couple minutes, just let people ask questions or say anything they would like to.
While people are populating their question too, I'll just, one point on that last slide about updating your policy. It wasn't until we had a group really kind of going through and digging into this for a while that we realized we didn't have anything that even spoke to some of the things Terry indicated, right? The course hero and Chegg and stuff. So we actually had to add to our policy that uploading or downloading any completed Baker College assignment on the internet is in and of itself a violation of the policy, right? Because like Terry said, well, it's just out there. There's this idea that it's okay because that's all out there and everybody can get it. So worth a peek at the policy to make sure your policy has kept up with the changing times.
So we have a question from Ed. Any research on how culture differences change one's perceptions of or what constitutes cheating? And I know tangentially this is an issue. I don't know if anyone can know specifically of any research on this.
I know from what we've done at Baker, we're not there yet to be able to measure it, but there is research on just the idea of why people cheat, right? So if we can address some of the underlying behaviors of why people cheat, they don't know. Like Terry said, that maybe that's cheating, or talking about the group assignment, or talking about an individual assignment, collusion, those sort of things. So sometimes that can do it. So there is research out there on that, right? If we can change that. But there's also research that say those hardcore cheaters are just going to cheat. The people that are making the labels and going to all ends to avoid just learning the material and doing it. Those ones are the hardest.
There are some cultural differences that, we have to be careful not to look at them as stereotypes and scrutinize certain papers more than others. But there are some cultures that feel that using the words of another is an honor to that original author. And they can't fathom why they should have to reward that because that was the expert that did it. So you sometimes have to have a personal talk with individual students that you catch doing this and listen to why they do it. And once they tell you, you can then say, all right, let's course correct about, the proper way to do it, or the proper way we want you to do it, and not hold it over them forever, but just explain to them and let them explain to you why they think that's acceptable. In many cases, like I said, they think it's honoring the other person. So, different cultures do matter. They differ. So that's something I've come across before.
Definitely. And I think even piggybacking on that too, just even hearing more students, and I would say they are the younger students or even my own kids, right? Saying this information is readily available. Why am I just being asked to regurgitate it, right? So I think thinking about having that conversation, we sometimes don't tell students that the purpose of this assignment is actually to see how well you can think critically about something, right? We set up a critical thinking type assessment. Can they synthesize and can they find and curate and synthesize information? But we don't tell them that's what we're doing, right? So they just see it as something else, like going through the steps of I got to find these resources, I got to summarize them, I got to do this. So sometimes even just talking, like you said, whether it's culturally or not, about kind of why we want them to do this. What's the purpose? We're really wanting to see if they can synthesize and articulate it in their own words.
That comes back to that transparency, right? Why we need to be transparent with everything that we do with our students.
Any final comments or questions anyone that wants to get in before we do a final wrap up? I did like, while someone's thinking about this, I did like a lot of what you all shared here. You shared some wonderful things. I like some of Terry's tactics that you had here, avoiding test banks. I know that's tricky to do for a lot of people, but good advice, scrambling the questions there, shortening the exam window, modifying it each semester, all good things, all very hard to do, but all good things. I loved what Baker was doing. I'll even go as far as saying jealous of what Baker's doing on the idea of going beyond the honor code, not to knock OU in any way, but really just trying to create that environment and some of the things you had on there of expectations for faculty and students. I think that's wonderful.
Well, thank you, Sean, very much for the moderation of this session. Michelle and Terry and Joanna, you did a great job. Just know that this will be available on the website. We're going to upload this and I'll send an email to everybody to make sure they know when it's available on the website. I also want to thank Walsh College for their sponsorship of this event. They provide the technology and the support to record the seminar, so thank you, Walsh College. I do want to let you know our next seminar is going to be on December 10th, and the focus of that seminar is on flexibility, instruction and flexibility to enhance student engagement. So I'll send, as I have before, information out to you guys regarding that particular session on the 10th of December at 10 o'clock. So again, thank you to everybody for their participation, and look to the website for this seminar to be posted, post with here. We'll get it up posted pretty quickly. So thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.